Honorable Shivambu of the EFF will take the debate forward. Honorable speakers, please pardon us. Our technology is failing us. The clocks are off, but we have our clock here. So I'm sorry for that. They are working on it.
There's no problem, House Chair. I'll finish. You will just let me talk when the perspective is clear. I will say I'm done. Then you will know the time has been dealt with. No, thank you very much, House Chair. And I want to start by saluting the commissars and fighters who earlier on took a courageous action against Mr. Rogue Unit. For taking that action, it's courageous. When we did that on the 5th Parliament, against Mr. Jacob Zuma, a lot of people reacted in the manner in which society is reacting now and say the EFF is reckless and so on and so forth. And Zuma is later on removed as a president because of the EFF, so single-handedly. And when we raised concerns against Nhlanhla, the same issues were raised there. We told him exactly in this room that he won't be a minister of finance for a very long time, and he fell on his own sword. So we want to tell Mr. Rogue Unit that he won't be a minister for a very long time, and at least this is on record. He will fall on his own sword very soon. Now, Minister, the previous financial statements of the National Treasury illustrates that there was irregular expenditure of about 758 million rands and wasteful expenditure of 67 million rand by National Treasury, which amongst its many responsibilities is to educate and guide the municipalities and other government departments against irregular and wasteful expenditures. But National Treasury is involved in that as well. There's no believable mechanisms to arrest that thus far. And I don't know why the chairperson of the committee, when he was speaking about the mechanisms that they have to be dealt with, he never spoke about that. He also never spoke about the fact that we said in the committee that the process that was followed to appoint SARS commissioner must be reported to Parliament so that we can satisfy ourselves that it was a thorough process that we are dealing with in terms of all of those issues. Let's leave that, and that is obvious. We can't agree with the budget vote that doesn't have mechanisms on how we're going to deal with irregular and wasteful expenditure. Let's deal now much more substantially with some of the policy issues that we raised in SONA. One is the issue of establishment of a sovereign wealth fund. I see the Department of Trade and Industry, the minister is excited about it. It should not be established in Department of Trade and Industry. It must be under National Treasury, but it must be preceded, Chair, by a joint study tour of the committee and the National Treasury to Singapore and to Norway. When we're about to pass the legislation called the Twin Peaks legislation around the regulation and oversight of financial institutions, who undertook a joint study tour to different countries, we should do that, and then we come back with proper legislative framework on how a sovereign wealth fund should be established. Because although it's going to play microeconomic roles, there are macroeconomic consequences that will come with the sovereign wealth fund. That is one issue. So the Financial Matters Amendment Bill, I think it's an act now which was passed last year, somehow permits for creation of state banks. One is that we must expedite the licensing of Post Bank into a fully fledged bank. It disburses currently almost 200 billion of social grants to different individuals. So it must be brought into a regular framework that is outlined in the Banks Act. It's long overdue. It's a logical thing that must be done, but also the South African Reserve Bank must, as a matter of urgency, exit its ownership of the African Bank, and those shares must be ceded to the National Treasury. The shares that are owned by the consortium of banks must be ceded to black owners in a proper way that is guided in terms of what should happen. And then we must then introduce a new ownership model of a state-owned company in terms of what should happen. Now, about the PIC, we think we have said that publicly, that we don't agree with the appointment of Maria Ramos She's your friend and her husband is your friend. So that appointment is nepotistic. It's wrong. And we must say this in front of you. We're not gossiping. We're saying it in front of you that don't put people that are closer to you in the management of extremely complex institutions, particularly the PIC. But the policy issue that is long overdue about the PIC is its investment mandate. That you cannot permit and allow government pension funds to be overexposed in the manner in which PIC assets are exposed to NARSPAs. 250 billion rands worth of shares are owned by the PIC in NARSPAs. That is like more than 10% of the overall assets under management. What will happen to government employees' pensions if NARSPAs follows the same crisis that Steinhoff faced? You're just going to lose 250 billion in the manner that is. So the investment mandate of the PIC should be debated in the fifth parliament, where it began to legislate that there must be developmental impact in terms of the investment decisions of the PIC on the people who are depositors, who are putting money there. But we had said that government must not outsource its responsibilities in the management of PIC funds because it underwrites all the assets under GEPF. So you can't outsource that. So your deliberate exclusion of the deputy minister from the board of the PIC is problematic. It's actually reactionary. And I must say it here is not a gossip. It's one of the issues that were publicly communicated as the EFF. You have to rethink that. You still have time to deal with it much more differently in terms of all these issues. Now, you need to utilize fiscal policy and broadly procurement policies to drive localization and industrialization. And that can only happen through amendment of the existing procurement laws. That the state should purchase all, more than 80%, if not 90%, if not 100% of goods that are made in South Africa. And then that will be an obligatory law in terms of what should happen. We are going to table the law that will discontinue private ownership of the South African Reserve Bank. Don't understand the excitement around that in terms of all these issues. But we don't agree with the budget because you are not ready to manage the finances. You are not ready to deal with the wasteful and irregular expenditures that incurred in the previous financial year.
Thank you very much.
I said I must finish first and then we'll conclude from that perspective.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much.
Thank
Sure.
you.